When I was in college, I lived in the same room of the same dorm all 4 years. It was the band dorm. So those of us who were members of the Marching Virginians, we always got first dibs on rooms in this dorm because it was the closest one to our practice fields. Well, I lived on the first floor, which was called the cave. It was called the cave because it was half underground and there were only rooms on one side of the hall. So those of us who lived on the cave were pretty tight. We did meals together in the dining room all the time. And a few of us on the floor were members of a Bible study together. This Bible study was led by a senior. His name was Tim, and he lived off campus. Well, when we would go out to dinner together in the dining hall, our favorite pastime was to give each other a hard time. As young men often do, we tried to one-up each other on creative put-downs. Well, one night, Tim joined us for dinner in the dining hall before our Bible study, and he was strangely quiet during the meal. Then we gathered into one of our rooms, and he got us to turn to Ephesians chapter 4, verse 29. And I still remember this particular Bible study to this day because it wasn't a planned Bible study. It was a response to something that we were doing. And for our group, it was a transformational night. So we started in Ephesians 4:29, and I'm going to read it from the New International Version, which is the version I first learned it in. Do not let any unwholesome talk come out of your mouths, but only what is helpful for building others up according to their needs, that it may benefit those who listen. And Tim explained that our words have incredible power. What he heard us doing that night was a whole lot of unwholesome talk. What is unwholesome talk? Well, it wasn't just the put-downs. It was the off-color jokes and the crass humor that we would use. Some translations call it corrupting talk. It's actually a word in the Greek that means rotten, like fruit that is overripe and disgusting. Well, Tim also explained that we were putting a lot of energy into tearing each other down with our words. What Paul tells us we should be focusing on instead is building each other up. And the fancy word for that is edifying. Tim suggested that we ask ourselves, are these words that I'm saying building this other person up, or are they tearing them down? Because those are our only two options. Well, we actually tried to argue with Tim at first. We explained that we were only joking, and we all understood that it was joking, so no harm, no foul, right? Well, he had a response ready for that. Proverbs 26, verses 18 and 19. It says, like a madman who throws firebrands, arrows, and death is the man who deceives his neighbor and says, I am only joking. Well, that proverb got our attention. He explained that every joke contains an element of truth to it. And even though we said that we were not hurt or offended by each other, all it took was a little personal insult to get underneath our skin and to start building up resentment little by little. And then Tim dug a little deeper with us. He turned us to Proverbs 18, verse 21. Death and life are in the power of the tongue, and those who love it will eat its fruits. Well, that's where we camped out. He explained to us that every time that we uttered a put down, we were speaking words of death to each other. We were literally tearing each other down to the point of destroying each other. As believers in Jesus, we should be speaking words of life to each other instead. Words of death or words of life. That's what's at stake in our speech. Well, over the years, I've watched a whole lot of Christians use rotten speech in churches. It's just in our churches, we don't recognize it as quickly because it doesn't usually come out as dirty jokes or insults. A lot of times we even disguise it as spiritual language. But really the effect of our speech is that we are tearing people down with our words. And the problem is we just don't think about the power of our words to build up or tear down. And that's another reason why so many people have a hard time feeling like they can trust people enough to build friendships in our churches. I've gone back to those biblical phrases so many times. Speak words of life, not death. No unwholesome talk, only that which builds up. I've needed to slow down and to think about what I want to say before I say it. So let me ask you this question. Would you eat a rotten tomato? One of those ones that's fallen off the plant and just laid in the dirt for a couple of weeks and it's gotten all discolored and mushy? I'm going to go ahead and assume that your answer is hard pass. But if that's the case, then why would you speak a rotten word to your friend or your neighbor? Let no corrupting, rotten talk come out of your mouths, but only such as is good for building up, as fits the occasion, that it may give grace to those who hear. I encourage you, memorize that verse. It is an essential part of the lost art of friendship.